Hello there. Today we have a rather bizarre product to look at that poses the question, is this the future of coffee? Let me go get it. Now, while these may look like coffee bags, that's not exactly the full story. This comes to us from a brand called Atomo. This is something I had seen a couple years ago when they initially launched, but it popped up again recently. I ordered a couple bags, they just arrived, and I thought we would kind of break into them. Let's talk about what's actually happening here. Now, before we begin the very fun activity of brewing what is inside this bag, let's talk a little bit about Atomo to give you some context here. Now, Atomo was a startup that began in Seattle, Washington, I believe about 5 or 6 years ago, and their kind of core product throughout the various iterations they've been through has been what they call beanless coffee, which is a very, very funny combination of words. Essentially, kind of their ethos is that coffee as a crop is not sustainable, and so they want to figure out a way to recreate the taste, aroma, solubility, just the overall experience of coffee with other plant-based ingredients. Now, when Atomo initially launched, their earlier product lines were very much based around ready-to-drink cold coffee cans. So this was like pure beanless coffee. This is such a, there's so many strange words I'm saying today. These were ready-to-drink cold coffee cans that were pure beanless coffee. And to my knowledge, you can't really find them anymore, but they have shifted into more of a wholesale and like kind of consumer bagged coffee focus nowadays. As of recording this video, Atomo sells 3 products that you as a consumer can purchase online. All of these come in at right around $15 for a bag, which is 12 ounces. We have a medium roast, a dark roast, then we also have a collaboration coffee with Bluestone Lane. Now, what's interesting about these is all 3 of these, as their kind of core product line nowadays, are not fully beanless. These are actually 50-50 blends. So we have kind of vaguely stated 50% Arabica coffee and then 50% beanless coffee. So now that we know what we're working with, where we came from, let's actually look at these bags and let's brew some. Now, already at the top of their bag, their kind of brand positioning is made very clear. At the top of every bag, it says the most sustainable coffee on the planet, which is it's a very big statement for sure. We have some tasting notes. Tasting notes on the medium roast are brown sugar, baker's chocolate, and apricot, which does lead me to believe this is going to be a pretty roasty coffee. So we'll take that into context once we get to actually tasting. Moving on to the back. This is where things got very funny for me once I initially opened up this bag, because you don't usually see nutrition facts on the back of a coffee bag. But since we have non-coffee like plant ingredients in this, it does legally have to have nutrition facts. And also, interestingly enough, there are calories per serving, which is just another funny thing that you don't usually see on coffee bags. Again, this is a negligible amount of calories. That's not the funny thing about this. It's just the fact that this has to be on here was a little bit startling when I first opened this up. We have a roast date, we have a QR code to a little brew guide, and then we have our ingredients list. So let's talk about what is actually in this. First ingredient, beanless coffee. To make the beanless coffee, we have upcycled date seeds, which I will make a note here, using roasted date seeds as the base for beverages or coffee-like beverages is not a new thing. This is a very, very old tradition that I believe is primarily from the Middle East. I did a video on this years ago, but it's very common to roast and grind date seeds similarly to how you do coffee. Okay, tangent aside, beanless coffee. We have upcycled date seeds, carob, psyllium husk, whole grain white cornmeal, organic fructose, oat protein, pea protein, chicory root, defatted fenugreek seed, sunflower seed extract, green tea caffeine, and finally, some Arabica coffee, an ingredient that we all know and are very familiar with. Okay, that is about all the information we have on the bag, so let's get this out in a bowl. Nice. Now, it's worth noting that you can only buy Atomo's coffee in pre-ground form, which frankly makes a lot of sense. I personally wouldn't want to put non-coffee through a grinder, and I don't think you would either. In some of their behind the scenes production videos, you can see that they take the non-coffee ingredients, they roast them down to a very dark level, and then they form them into these sort of like small coffee bean sized pellets. And then everything gets ground evenly and then blended together and bagged. On the nose, this is very, very like dark chocolate, cacao nib, very little fruitiness, just like super roasty. As I noted before, this is definitely specialty dark. Light, medium, and dark really don't have like actual definitions, but this is what most people in the specialty world will associate with being a dark roast rather than a medium. Interestingly enough, I feel like the grind size distribution is actually pretty decent, at least much better than I usually see with pre-ground coffee. That bodes well. Now, unfortunately, their pure beanless espresso grind coffee is only available to wholesale clients, and that is the stuff that I so sadly was not able to get my hands on. What we have here is designated for drip, French press, pour over, and cold brew, and I know we want different grind sizes for those, but this is the plight of pre-ground coffee. Basically, all you can tell the customer is that this is for a filter brew, and please don't put this in your espresso machine. Their provided brewing recommendations are basically the exact same as any other coffee recommendation, so we're gonna go with 15 grams to about 240 mils of water. It's interesting adding water to this, because without any water, it very much just looks like dark roasted coffee, but like as you add water, you can tell there's something that isn't quite coffee in here. Well, it's always a good sign when it looks like coffee. Oh, there's a really interesting kind of unusually earthy aroma happening here. It's just it's a little bit muddy altogether. Okay, that was about 3 minutes of drain time. Cheers. So off the bat, this doesn't not taste like coffee. I'm so sorry for the double negative. What I was expecting was a stronger separation between the flavors of what was coffee and what wasn't. Altogether, this feels pretty homogeneous as a beverage. The primary flavor component in this is like very, very much the roast. It is dark and dark chocolate and like kind of a little bit nutty maybe, but really like higher bitterness, very, very low acidity. And it has this, the more it like sits on my palate, I can taste it. It has this weird kind of artificial sweetness thing happening. And I'm gonna do my best to like separate this all out. It's not sweetness in like that there was sugar added or that there's a high intensity of sweetness, but it's this like marker in my brain where it says there's a flavor of sweetness that doesn't naturally occur in coffee. And it's a very confusing thing to have just experienced. Really, truly, this is like the uncanny valley of coffee drinking. Flavor aside, what is also super noticeable initially in this is that the tactile is noticeably different than what I would expect from a darker roasted, like pretty soluble coffee. This is very, very light, very like almost watery is probably the word I would best use to describe this. It lacks really any texture or mouthfeel or any body to it. It's like the flavor is kind of like there and then it just like disappears. But it is far more coffee-like than I was expecting this to be. Now I feel like I've been pretty neutral and just mostly descriptive about this product so far. And the reason for that is I originally purchased Atomo coffee because I had kind of like an interesting gut reaction when I saw some press floating around about it. As someone who cares a lot about coffee, and I'm assuming if you clicked on this video or are a frequent viewer, you care probably a little bit about coffee, seeing something that was looking to replicate and ultimately substitute coffee, like caused my hackles to raise a little bit. Like I kind of had this like gut reaction of like, I don't like this. And usually when I have those sorts of feelings, my strategy is to then say, well, is there a way I can actually experience this and form a more well-rounded opinion rather than just like writing this off and saying like, this is bad because I think I don't like it. So that was kind of the beginning of all of this. And having now tried this experience, at least in the form that it's available to me, I have like a mixed set of opinions. So I'll start off with kind of the first thing that comes to mind. As someone who really enjoys playing with flavor, I love cooking, I love messing around with ingredients. You've seen on this channel, I make all sorts of weird, wacky coffee drinks with all sorts of tools and techniques. I think as an ingredient, what they have done to replicate a very, very complex profile like coffee is fascinating. I think it's so cool that we're even able to achieve something that is relatively close to coffee with things like carob and chicory root and sunflower seed extract. I think that's like fantastic. And all of that being said, coffee with additives has been around for a long time. I mean, currently I feel like we kind of live in the era of mushroom coffee. We've had coffee with chicory for a long time. Date seed coffees have been around for a long time. You even have like flavored coffee. Like none of this is necessarily new, but I think the thing that like becomes really tricky for me to kind of bargain with really lives in the form that they are selling nowadays, with the fact that we have reintroduced real coffee into something that I personally want to call an ingredient more than I want to call it coffee. Something we touched on a little bit at the beginning, but I didn't really go too deep into at the front, is the fact that Atomo has very, very specific and explicit brand messaging as to what their goals with this replacement and substitution are. They very, very clearly state on their website and I mean on their packaging, as we saw, that this is a more sustainable version of coffee. If you go online, you can click through all of their different little graphs that say, this is how much better for the environment this is than traditionally grown coffee. I think that's where this gets really murky with the fact that they have now reintroduced coffee into this equation. Because as we talked about, as a consumer, you can only buy this in a half beanless, half coffee form. Now I wanted to do as much due diligence on this as I could. I didn't want to take anything at face value, so I spent a decent amount of time researching online where the other half of this blend comes from. I was like, great, there's coffee in it. I'm sure I will enjoy that. I would love to know where that comes from. And as far as I can tell from the research that I did, there isn't anything online, there isn't anything on the packaging for sure telling you where this coffee is from, how it was produced, who's roasting it, any of those facts. And that kind of black box of information and lack of transparency feels kind of explicitly at odds with the fact that they're saying that coffee is bad. But then we have coffee. But is this the bad coffee or is this maybe good coffee? So I guess that's where this all gets just like a little bit sticky. It still feels like there are some pretty major gaps that need to be bridged, and it almost feels like Atomo has taken a pretty major step back in re-including real coffee, which feels kind of like an oxymoron, but it really does kind of put them at odds with their messaging in the way that coffee is included in this right now. I think my hope for the future of coffee is that we find better and more sustainable ways to grow coffee on its own, which, by the way, is something that is being studied and worked on and is a very, very real thing that's happening right now. This overall messaging of coffee isn't sustainable is not something that is unique to coffee. This is something that is true of many, many agricultural crops and products and monocrops. But I don't know. I am just one singular person, and those are just my little rambly opinions. So I'd kind of like to turn it over to you all because I think this is an interesting and polarizing product that has a lot of good and maybe some trickier things. So I'll leave it with you. Let me know in the comments what you think of something like this, or if you would drink it. But in the meantime, I'm not a waster. I have brewed this coffee. I'm gonna go finish it. And as usual, my name is Morgan. You can find me here on YouTube once a week, plus shorts, or TikTok or Instagram almost every single day. I also run a newsletter on Substack called Coffee for Here. So until the next time, It was lovely to see you all. I'll see you next time.